Welcome to the episode, and thank you for tuning in. I'm Patrick Fitzmaurice, CEO of the change activation consulting firm Caterpillar Farm and host of the Change Cultivators podcast. Before we get to our next great younger change leader, let me ask that if you like the discussions we're having and the content we bring, please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on LinkedIn. It's a great help for us to have. We have big plans for the future of this platform, and we really need to build the community going forward. So please feel free to do that. Our 40 Under 40 Global Change Leader Series is such a great opportunity for us to shine a light on great younger leaders of change. We can recognize their great accomplishments, and we can learn some great insights on change and change leadership from them. Today's guest is no exception, Annie Mayfield. Annie is blazing a career in technology sales, but that's really only a part of Annie's amazing story and the leadership insights that she can give us from really a relatively early career stage. Despite graduating from Wofford College in South Carolina here in the United States in 2020, let's just note a few things about Annie. In addition to her tech sales, she's also a business owner. She started a sideline business. She's a 4-time, soon-to-be 5-time author. Her books have been #1 Amazon bestsellers, New Age and New Thought. She runs a podcast called Made to Shine, which is streamed by individuals in 42 countries. It's the top 25% of podcasts shared globally. You know, she just has such a great core to her. I think you'll learn a lot from this conversation. One of the things I'd ask you to listen to closely is a great change leader. You need to source whatever the source of your change leadership identity is. You need to get clear on what that is and ground in that. Enjoy. Annie Mayfield, how are you today?
I am fantastic. How are you, Patrick?
I am fabulous. And congrats to you for being selected one of our Change Cultivators 40 Under 40 Global Change Leaders. How did you feel about that when you learned that?
I was honored, truly. I was absolutely humbled, honored. I know there's so many remarkable people on that list too. So just honored that you guys thought of me and love what you're doing here with this, with everything, the organization, the program, all of it.
Awesome. So we are so excited to have you as part of this group. It's so fun. It's the first time we've done it, but it's so cool to have so many great younger change leaders who are proven, who have done some great stuff. I've got a couple things for us to dig into because, you know, you and I have bounced around a few things. And so a few thoughts. You had said something to me in our short little prep conversation, which I thought was interesting, which is indecision is kind of the worst decision a leader can make, being indecisive, and maybe even more for a change leader. Go a little bit deeper on that. What did you mean by that? What does that mean to you, and what have you learned, and what do you think our listeners should take away?
Sure. I think that indecision is something that absolutely paralyzes any person that God has kind of given them a seed to do something to catalyze change. And a lot of times we sit in our indecision because we're so afraid of making the wrong move or going the wrong direction. But something I learned very early on is this idea of just failing forward, in the sense that the only real failure is not moving at all. You can only create momentum and thus create change when you move, when you pick a direction and you go. And sometimes, like, the wrong decision we're all so afraid of making, at the very least, it gives you the knowledge and the understanding, okay, that wasn't the right decision. Let me pivot. Let me change course. If you never do anything, if you never make a decision, you don't really know what the wrong thing is or the right thing is. And that only comes from doing and by moving and not sitting in analysis paralysis.
So you have a confidence in you about that, which is really insightful and remarkable. I think I get a sense of where that comes from. But I want you to talk about that a little bit. Like, you have a confidence as a younger person, that a lot of people don't have. Where does that come from? And how does that help you say, look, it probably helps me be more decisive. It grounds me, et cetera. Talk a little bit to that if you don't mind.
Sure. You know, I will say first and foremost, it comes from just my faith. It does. It comes from my faith in Jesus. It comes from my faith in the fact that, you know, we have a very limited time on this earth. And as a young girl, I went through an experience where I was in a pretty chaotic car accident, actually. And it kind of made me understand at a young age how limited our time is here. From there, I have very high standards for what I pursue and what I'm intentional towards, because I know that my time here on this earth is limited and I have to kind of be more focused in on the decisions that I make. That being said, going through that process and going through life with that filter and with that understanding, it's just knowing that God is going to use it all for good. He tells us that. And so, right, he says, I use all things for good. Well, what's the opposite of all things? It's no thing. So if I do nothing, then it can't be used for good. So whether it's the wrong move or the right move, it doesn't matter. It will be used for me and for him. And knowing that, I have confidence to move because it will end for the good always, as long as I move and make a decision and do something.
I love it. And change leaders can learn so much of that, although some change leaders may have to seek that grounding from someplace else, maybe not faith, right? Yours is anchored in a deep faith-based way that gives you, I think, the confidence and the wherewithal to make decisions on paths chosen, et cetera, so on. How would you coach a leader who may not have that grounding to replicate that, like to be able to do something that says, look, you've got to be more confident in what you're doing, and it's got to be sourced in something. How might you help somebody who might not choose or may not be down that path of being grounded from a faith and spiritual way that you brought that forward just now?
Sure. And you use that word, how do you source? And that's what I would say. I would say you have to identify your source. Like, why do you do what you do? That's got to be deeper than, I feel like people nowadays, we're so surface level. We're so superficial, which is why it's hard for us to have the momentum to make decisions. And it's hard for us to stick to something, especially my generation. You know, we want to put our dreams in the microwave and have them come out 15 seconds later. And that's just not how it works. And you've got to have that grounding of, is it your family? Are you really grounded by, like, I need to do this for my kids or my future kids? Or are you connected to something like deeper? It's another sort of spirituality, or it's just, it's love. It's this idea like you are driven by love. It's making an impact. It's leaving a place better than you found it. Whatever it is, I would coach people to say, what's your why? And identify that, and then branch out to what are you going to do with that why? And then from there, it's like, what are the decisions we need to look at, and what are we going to make here? But it starts with the why.
I love it. That's a big Simon Sinek reference right there, right? What's your why?
Yes.
I love it. So talk to guys. So let's go just a click deeper on that. Talk to guys like me who are a little older than you are, in a corporate environment, potentially, leading a team that has to go through change. And yeah, I'm listening to Annie, and she's talking about things like anchor in my family and anchor in this. But this is business. What Annie's talking about is over here. This is business, right? This is what I do in my business life. And I think there's a reluctance sometimes to bridge those two. How do you see it as you've observed and you've talked to other leaders? How do you see it, and how do you help people kind of go, look, you can't do that thing, or maybe you don't believe you can. Maybe you believe you can do that thing. Compartmentalize. Tell us a little bit about how you might think through that for people.
I think, yes, we all wear different hats, and we all do. I wear so many hats. I'm in a corporate environment. I'm in an entrepreneurial environment. And what I understand is, like, going back to my source for me is my creator, but also just like love in general. There's different expressions of love in different environments, depending on the hats that I wear. And we're talking about like a corporate environment here. If you're leading a group through change, I think it's really important to identify that. One, especially what I see for myself in the corporate space, like change leaders, they never make assumptions. They listen to their people. They hear from them what their people need, what they think, how they're feeling. They check in. They don't just assume everyone is unhappy or everyone's happy. They actually get the evidence. They collect it. They gather it. They take the time to do that. But the biggest thing, I think, Patrick, is they're not prone to make the popular decision. They do what's right. They make the hard, right decision. And I think sometimes, a lot of people just want to be liked by everyone and celebrated by everyone. And they chase the claps and the applause and the praise. And, a good leader is someone, regardless of age, they check in with their people, but they love their people enough to maybe not make the decision that the person's going to initially clap for, but it's going to make them better long term. And that's whether you're in a corporate environment or a sports environment or an entrepreneurial environment. It's, I love you enough to not let you stay where you are and take you to a place that's going to make you better, whether you like it or not initially.
It's a perfect segue to where I wanted to go, which is this kind of topic, which I think gets thrown around too much, is servant leadership, right? Yeah. And I get it, right? And I get that's a huge passion for you along the way, but it often gets watered down, right? This notion of being a servant leader, particularly being a servant leader in times of change, because many change leaders, from my observation, in times of change become somewhat more dictatorial, right? It's like change is happening and I need the team to do this. And so it's not about time to be servant driven. It's time to be command and control driven. But you have a great slant on servant leadership as you think about it. How do you think servant leadership connects to a leader in times of change or disruption to help make you and your team better at accomplishing the mission?
Such a good question. And I think servant leadership, when you come at it from the standpoint, there's kind of two views you can take. I think a lot of people misinterpret servant leadership nowadays in the sense that it's just like, I'm going to cater everything to you in the way that you want it. I'm going to give and give and give the way that you want it to be. And that's me being a good servant. I'm actually going to give an example here because I was just with my grandparents, and my granddad had a fall, and my grandma was taking care of him. And she did the most beautiful example of servant leadership in the sense that she provided for him. She gave him his medicine and his food. But when he didn't feel like doing his physical therapy, she said, no, we're getting up, we're walking, we're doing it, John, get up. And my grandma's very sassy, so that was fun to see. But that's a servant leader. It's like what I was going back to. It's making the right decision for people and loving them enough to do so, loving them enough to maybe get some hate for that, but knowing you're moving with them in the direction that's going to make them better, that's actually going to serve them. It's not about you. It's not about you getting praise or applause or claps. And we see Jesus doing that throughout his entire life, which for me is, regardless of beliefs, just studying his life, he's the best example of this. I'm making the hard, right decision now to make you better ultimately later, even though you might not see that now, but it's rooted in love. It's rooted in, I'm doing this with you. I'm not going to let you do anything I'm not willing to do myself. Let's do this together. And I think coming back to it, that's when I think of servant leadership, that's the illustration that comes to mind.
I love that you brought in that example, and you and I touched on this quickly in our prep call a while back. There is a person who could serve as a great example of a change leader who's started a movement that thousands of years later has spread across the globe and is still changing lives and moving things. And it's kind of leadership lessons from Jesus Christ, right? I actually firmly believe that somebody needs to write a book about that. I don't know if there is one. There may be. I actually have it in my scribble pad that I write down things that I think are leadership lessons for there. What do you think are some more leadership lessons? You mentioned one. What other leadership lessons do you think you can take from his example?
Oh, so many. But I think one, it's saying no. And what I mean by that is Jesus didn't let other people speed up his timeline. Jesus didn't let other people and maybe the clout or the praise or the claps or the applause he was getting speed up his mission and what he had to do. I mean, even like his brothers were like, you need to go to this festival. You need to show what you can do. And that was out of their own insecurity and their own fear. And Jesus said, it is not my time. I think that's a huge lesson we can learn. That, when you have a goal, when you have a mission, there's going to be people that want you to move faster because they feel like they have to prove themselves in some way if they're on board. But, you know the pace, the time, and sometimes it's saying no. There's other times too that it's not about being seen or being heard, or it's about hearing other people. I mean, that was Jesus' entire ministry, is he would go heal people. He made other people feel seen. One of my favorite stories was when the woman who had been bleeding for so long, touched Jesus' robe. She was healed. It was such a busy crowd. For those that know the story, why did he turn back? Why did he want to find her? Well, it's the only time in the Bible he called a woman daughter. And so it's so much more of, he wanted to heal her heart and be seen as a daughter, not just the physical pain. And I think a real leader, they see past the superficialness. Like, they want to govern themselves in love, lead in service. And, they say, I'm not going to make you do anything that I'm not willing to do. Jesus was tempted. Jesus went through all of that. He did it too. And I know, like, when I have my moments where I'm like, gosh, this thing I'm going through, it's just, Jesus went through that too. People laughed at it and mocked him too. And, just in my life, I think that's why he's touched as many people as he had, because people can point to him and say, he gets it. He's lived it.
I love it. So I got to wrap us up, but I would want to go on forever. So maybe we'll figure out a way for you and I to have that conversation again in the future. Congrats to you on being part of this group of 40 under 40 change leaders. How can people follow you? I know you have a podcast. What would you like to drop right now? It will be in the follow-up stuff that we push out, but what would you like to drop to close us out?
Oh my gosh. Well, one, just honored, humbled, and it is so cool what you all are doing. And I have such a big heart for the younger generation. We have so many amazing things going on. So thank you for shining light on that. TikTok, Instagram, Annie B. Mayfield is my handle on both. My podcast is Made to Shine. It's everywhere you can stream podcasts. And my 5th book is dropping Sunday. And that will be in Target, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all the places. So excited for that.
Awesome. Well, Annie Mayfield, thank you.
Thank you.